Coordination, what's good? On the pod today, I have a very special episode with my friend, Awa, the co-founder of Anoma. What is Anoma and why does it matter? Anoma is a decentralized application architecture that allows for complex applications to be built with fundamentally new primitives. So basically, the fundamental atomic unit of Anoma is the intent, which is basically something you want to do, a financial transfer that you want to do. I want to turn token X into token Y. I want to send tokens to person X. I want to trade an NFT for tokens. Or I want to say, hey, fund a quadratic funding round. So you broadcast an intent, which is basically like a JSON blob, and multiple users can create their multiple intents. And then there's this gossip layer where there's an agent called a solver that goes around and collapses the intents together into outcomes that are collapsed on chain. So basically, why is this a fundamentally new architecture for building decentralized applications? Well, now the gossip layer provides a way of doing counterparty discovery that's totally decentralized and scalable. So we talk in this episode about not just like what would it look like to build a DEX on top of Anoma where the counterparty discovery is decentralized using Anoma's gossip layer, but also NFT marketplaces, quadratic funding on top of Anoma, L2 sequencers, just the general design space of decentralized coordination. And this is a really interesting episode for me because I believe that the more money Legos there are for creating decentralized coordination, the more we can solve coordination failures, solve multipolar traps, create a more regenerative crypto economic world. And I just really feel this thesis coming together that the more money Legos there are for regen crypto, the more we can make crypto regenerative, the more we can regenerate the world with crypto. And, you know, like Gitcoin's new grants protocol is kind of this money Lego that allows any DAO to use quadratic funding in their ecosystem. Anoma is kind of a new decentralized architecture that makes it easier to do decentralized coordination. And a lot of these coordination failures are multipolar traps. They're multi-agent systems that require better tools for decentralized coordination if we're going to build DApps that are going to solve this space. So anyway, little preview of the episode there for you. I was just so technical and brilliant, and I'm a big fan of Anoma's architecture. If you've been attending Shelling Point or been a part of the Regen Web3 movement, then maybe you've heard of them. But if this is your first time, I think you're kind of in for a treat because it breaks my brain to think about the way Anoma has architected things and the way that could complement a whole ecosystem of regenerative crypto economic projects. Do you know any regenerative crypto economics projects, Anon? So it's all coordination. It always has been. Anoma is a new tool for coordination. And I'm really excited to give you this episode of Awa with the Anoma team. Enjoy.
Working in Web3 is awesome. It's freeing, powerful, and so much fun. But working outside of the typical W-2 employee structure is a deal breaker for so many. OPOLIS is helping the self-sovereign worker focus on what they do best, their work, while managing the back end for them. There is a lot of nation-state overhead when working in Web3, and OPOLIS takes care of all of the back-end stuff, freeing you up to do what you do best. OPOLIS leverages group buying power through a community employment co-op, helping you save 20 to 50% on high-quality, affordable healthcare options through Cigna. So, do what you love and maintain your financial security. With OPOLIS, you must be authorized to work in the United States to receive OPOLIS benefits, but OPOLIS is expanding its services to Canada starting on January 1st, 2023. So, book a 30-minute consultation with the OPOLIS experts and join OPOLIS by December 31st of 2022 and get 1,000 work tokens and 1,000 bank tokens when you sign up. So go to connect.opolis.co/bankless to get started. GOLDFINCH is a decentralized credit protocol with a mission to connect the world's capital to the world's growth. GOLDFINCH focuses on real yields from real companies, so start lending your USDC to real businesses driving growth worldwide. GOLDFINCH's borrowers are proven fintechs and credit funds in emerging markets who need access to GOLDFINCH's capital to drive economic growth in regions faced with barriers to financial access. In just under 2 years, GOLDFINCH has loaned over 100 million USDC, reaching over 1 million people and businesses across 28 countries. GOLDFINCH is doing what DeFi was always meant to do, expanding financial access to those who have historically been shut out of the TradFi system. So, become a GOLDFINCH member to put your USDC to work, empowering real businesses' growth. Join GOLDFINCH's new member vaults to be an active investor and take part in supporting GOLDFINCH's security and expansion. Receive yield enhancements generated by protocol revenue, plus access exclusive communication channels and more. So go to goldfinch.finance to get started.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, it's going well. How about you?
Pretty good. Really excited for this episode. We've been circling each other for a little while, and you've kind of pulled me aside and told me about what you're working on. I think it's really exciting. So looking forward to unpacking it this episode. So with that as my tee off, I will ask you, what is Anoma?
So Anoma, we go straight to the point, right?
Yep.
So TLDR of Anoma is it is a third generation of how you can architect blockchains, and it is architecturally something that allows you to build all these modern applications that you see. For example, NFT marketplaces, Gitcoin quadratic funding rounds, all these complex applications that require counterparty discovery and solving. So it allows us to build all these extended applications, but without requiring any centralization point in any of the components. That would be one part of it. But another advantage of this architecture is that it does expose a bunch of novel primitives, and it allows you to build applications that you will have a really, really hard time. In some cases, it will be impossible to build on some of the existing programmable settlement architectures.
Got it. So it sounds like you're building a new coordination architecture that kind of gives new primitives that are just kind of elegant for a more decentralized world. Namely, I mean, counterparty discovery being baked into the protocol, I think is really interesting. So could we dig a little bit deeper?
Yeah. So something that and this is very related to everything around public goods funding and quadratic voting and pro money. I've been reading a lot, all the publications from the Radical Exchange group, and I'm really excited about it because these are the kinds of ideas and applications that benefit from Anoma's architecture the most. And this is primarily because the key, if you need to remember one thing about Anoma, is that the fundamental unit in Anoma's architecture, it is not a transaction, like a finalized thing that can be settled on chain. It is the intent. And the intent is basically a description of an individual's desired end state. So the users do not define this is my call stack of smart contracts. So users don't define I want to trade one Bitcoin for ETH. What they're actually signing off is the end state that they're okay with. And once you start with the intent centricity of this architecture, you can actually include way more information in the user intents. Imagine something like where you are no longer compressing any more things into transactions, but where you are, for example, a very good example for this would be a ballot for a quadratic funding of voting round, where the beauty of this mechanism is that you're not voting yes or no or this or that. You're voting, this is my list of preferred projects that I want to fund, and based on how much I want to allocate for my total budget, I'm actually expressing a more complex set of values.
What's the next step after an intent is broadcast? Is there someone that settles that, like does the counterparty discovery and then settles that to an actual layer one chain transaction?
Yeah. So actually, what happens when multiple users create different intents, and then that might in the end be part of an application. But what happens is that the intents get gossiped around in what we call the intent gossip layer. This is a peer-to-peer network that is not consensus relevant. And any peer can be a gossip node. You can gossip it around. You can choose specific network peer-to-peer layers where you think your intent is more relevant for. This is all up to the user and up to the gossip node operators. So this creates a kind of a set that is, you won't have a global view of all the available intents, but they all are floating around waiting to be settled. And remember, intents cannot be settled by themselves because they describe what the end state is, but they're not finalized transactions. So they cannot be settled per se. So at the gossip layer, there is a group of agents we call them solvers. And solvers are a crucial kind of network agent where they have the incentive to monitor the intent gossip layer and then try to figure out which intents can be combined in a way that they satisfy each other. So just to give you like a very example, like a simple example to follow through how these dynamics work. Think of an intent where you want to swap ETH for Bitcoin. And I'm just using this as an example, but in reality, intents can be arbitrary values, can be even arbitrary code. It's just like the swapping is easy for people to grasp. The intent actually says, I'm okay with the end state where I have -1 Bitcoin as long as I have plus 1,000 ETH. This is everything that the intent says, right? This goes into the gossip layer. And then the solvers look at this, and then they also try to find like, okay, there's actually 2 other intents that indirectly can be combined into a valid transaction that can be actually settled. This might be the case for a simple swap, but there might also be the case where a solver ends up combining up to hundreds or thousands of intents. And then in the end, all these intents are gathered and they crafted a transaction that is valid and satisfies the intents of thousands of individuals. So the solver combined with user intents, the intent gossip layer, and the activity of the solver is what enables the centralized counterparty discovery and distributed solving. And at the end of the solver's activities, what you end up with is a transaction that can be settled on chain. And afterwards, it follows, goes to the mempool, and then follows the consensus, validators, etc.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, I think that, this is quite a novel architecture in that it's got this intent gossip layer, which has to have to do with consensus, but it's almost like you've kind of got this marketplace in which different agents can broadcast intents, and then there can kind of be like mini marketplaces where you have different types of solvers that specialize in collapsing different types of intents. And you can start with applications that we already know that are good for blockchains, like trading one token for another or one NFT or for tokens. But we could also do more complicated multi-agent and maybe hundreds of agent type of intent solving applications. Yes. Am I saying that back to you right?
Yes, they actually got the high level idea really correctly. As in, for example, even when it comes to fungible and NFT trading, there is such thing as like an order book. You don't even need that. Like when you create the intent, you're kind of like creating an on-demand order book for whatever it is that you want to trade. That's like one characteristic that is really flexible from the user side. And there is no need for it because the protocol doesn't understand what a trade is or what an asset is. And there's no need for the protocol to understand that. And then coming to the example of that you mentioned, multiple agents, so it's like just 2 parties in the end, it's a trade or something like that. Imagine something like, and this is the early stage, I kind of want you guys to think about the framework first and get that. And then and then next time we can jam about like some cool applications that we could build with that. But even an application like Gitcoin is already multiple agents, right? The quantitative funding rounds has at least 3 kinds of agents. Ones are the grants, so the projects that want to seek for funding. Then we have the funding partners that will be funding the matching pools, and you have the contributors.
Don't remember, yeah. So it gets complicated when you have a 4-sided marketplace.
Four-sided, or you may be, and it gets even more complicated. Yeah, it even gets more complicated if you, for example, with the matching pool funders, partners, they have like different categories that they manage their own, right?
Yeah.
Like, so.
Yeah, should have just started a DEX back in the day. But yes, quadratic funding is powerful. Yeah, sorry, continue.
Yeah, so and I actually remember that you mentioned in one of your first episodes in this podcast that one problem with the Gitcoin team is that you actually have to do tons of compute to like end up with the final list of payments based on the matching pool and the contributions for individuals. Like you end up with this massive end-to-end dimensional matrix that you have to solve, right? And that actually is a very interesting thing because in Anoma's model, an interesting idea would be that Gitcoin would not have to become this party that kind of like allows or kind of becomes this kind of like facilitator for projects or individuals or funding partners. Instead, all of that could be autonomous.
Yeah.
And then this model, what Gitcoin will specialize in, which is incredibly hard, and at the moment there is no formal market for it, is in solving for QF rounds, which is what you guys are already doing, and you're developing extremely hard code to like try to produce this compute and solve like the final QF round.
Yeah, totally. It kind of like it would turn Gitcoin in, or maybe like whoever arranges the quadratic funding matching pool into just an intent that's broadcast, and then Gitcoin becomes maybe the first solver on the network, and maybe does a marketing layer in order to facilitate people to broadcast to those intent. But we no longer have to run this.
Yeah, the interesting thing, exactly. So the interesting thing would be that basically all those agents will be issuing their own intents into this peer-to-peer system. And there will be some kind of like, there could be some kind of identifier that allows you to tell, okay, all these intents are related to the next key GR round. But Gitcoin's front end would no longer be this one that like facilitates or like kind of enables people to participate or not. Gitcoin would just, the front end would just be visualizing what's going on in this peer-to-peer layer. So it's a lot more permissionless. And on the other hand, you could formalize it in a way where you say, for example, okay, we have Gitcoin that is operating this incredibly complex but specialized solver for QF rounds. There's a ton of compute and specialized software that we have to write to make this efficient. If you want to use us, then you can even request or give the option for the different participants in the network to fund the solving of Gitcoin. So, for example, intents could include a small fee that gets in the end paid out to Gitcoin, the Gitcoin solver, if the KF round was actually settled.
Right. Okay. So Grants Protocol is about to launch, which is the new decentralized version of Gitcoin Grants. I'm told I only have public information about this off of what I've seen on the Gitcoin blog. But basically, instead of having a state machine where everyone adds their transactions to a smart contract, and then someone goes in and when the round end turns that into a QF matching output, which is very computationally intensive, and then everyone can claim their payouts. You would have in the Anoma style architecture, you would have people broadcasting intents. But are the intents just like, I'm picturing in my mind is like just like a JSON blob, like
something like that? Yeah, it's like even coding.
Cool. Like I will give one die to project X on the condition that I get at least 25 matching for it.
You could do something like that, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just making up a very sky level architecture here, but and then there's also matching pool contributions where people say I will contribute 25K, 50K to this matching pool. There's intensive what goes in a matching pool that's maybe signed by Gitcoin, or maybe we could further decentralize that. And then at the end of the round, basically all of the intents are kind of captured. There's 700,000 contributions per quarter. So I don't know if there would be like a rolling solver that would have them, or if they would all be solved at the end of the round once we have all the data on the table.
There's a lot of flexibility. Yeah, you would be able to choose how you handle that.
Got it. So instead of a state machine, basically on the smart contract, you have this intent gossip layer that is sort of the fertile ground upon which this happens.
Mm-hmm. And then Anoma state machine is quite unique. It utilizes on a different design for smart contracts, what we call validated predicates. This is the difference is that we maximize the verification on chain, but the computation and execution is as off chain as possible, and this is what makes it also is more efficient with, for example, with parallel execution. But what would happen then is that once the Gitcoin solver submits this transaction that finalizes this round, all the payouts get triggered fully on chain, all the intents get fully settled, and there is no further involvement from any of the teams.
I want to take a step back and just say out loud why I find this architecture really elegant. And I want to get your reaction to that. So I know that I'm associated with this meme about coordination and how it's all coordination. And I believe that fundamentally that Web3 is going to enable new systems of collective intelligence in which multi-agent systems can come together and create outcomes that are greater than the sum of their parts in them. And I believe that Web3 is a new primitive where we can now transfer financial value. And we can do decentralized governance over these systems. So we can build things that are by, of, and for the people with Web3. That's like point one of why I'm just excited about the whole space. But building upon that, there's this category of things that are called coordination failures. And they're also called multipolar traps. And an example of a multipolar trap is basically like, oh, I like open source software. It creates $400 billion per year in economic value. And anytime I need to build a new website, I just do it with open source. I download Nginx as my web server. I use Postgres as my database server. Or actually, I should have decentralized examples of this. The Graph and ETH.limo are these open source tools. And but part of the problem is that I get those tools for free, and so there's no incentive for me to pay the maintainers of those tools. And that's the first pole of what's called the multipolar trap problem, which is basically there's no incentive for the system to regenerate itself because the open source is available for free online. But the second pole of the multipolar trap is that if everyone free rides on open source software or any public good, but I'm just using open source because that's, where Gitcoin started and where I started in this space. The first pole is, why I'm getting this for free, why would I pay for it? And then the second pole is, if enough agents free ride on it, then that causes maintainer burnout. People quit their jobs on open source and they go work for like fucking JP Morgan or something like that. And that's the second pole of the multipolar trap, which is basically like the system collapses because there's a lack of incentive. And then you're in this place where like open source software is unsecure, under-maintained, underfunded. And that's how you get to the multipolar trap, where open source can simultaneously be creating $400 billion per year in economic value. And also there's no way to coordinate outcomes of it. And it feels like Anoma is an architecture for me for solving multipolar traps, where I can say conditionally like, okay, I don't really want to pay for this, but I also don't want it to collapse. I'll broadcast an intent where if other agents agree to support this system, then we can all do it together. And Anoma feels like an architecture for me for solving multipolar traps. How does that feel to you?
You're going to make a co-founder Christopher really happy when he listens to this episode. If you, we have a vision paper that talks about this. And actually, the initial paper of Anoma did speak a lot about coordination problems and multipolar traps specifically. And we were like, the entire background story was that we were trying to pursue the design and actually serious creation of infrastructure that allow people to coordinate. We kind of were looking at existing architectures and felt like settlement would not be enough. And that kind of inspired us to come with this architecture that is not only flexible from an end to end in a decentralized fashion, but also where the intents allow you to express in like what it is that you want, your outcomes that you want in a way more complex manner. And it would allow you to create these mechanisms that could solve multipolar traps as you have described.
Got it. So have y'all iterated away from that sort of framing as the white paper has evolved? Is that still a part of the vision?
It is still a part of vision. The vision paper is still on our website. The new white paper that we have been sharing with people at the conferences, maybe you got a physical copy. That new white paper is just a little bit more focused into the architectural efficiencies in the industry. So it does talk more about if Anoma were live tomorrow, what it is that you can fully decentralize, what applications will benefit the most, and what new applications you can build. But that is just to just because the framework is so different from what we all used to. Like ever since we are right now at the stage where, similar to when Vitalik was trying to explain Ethereum to all people who are used to cryptocurrency protocols and scriptable settlement. Like at that time, I just can't imagine how challenging it was, like to tell people who all they knew about were the Bitcoin, color coins most, or like Bitcoin stock exchange. And then when Vitalik came and kind of just say like, you can do something that's a lot more expressive at the settlement layer. And so the challenge that we had in the past year and why we kind of changed the way we're communicating about Anoma is because we realized that our long-term goals were a little bit far out. You guys are some of the few groups that start to think about coordination failure and coordination problems, multipolar traps. Like I was incredibly excited to run into you guys in Denver, Showing Point.
Yeah.
But still, I think when you want to get people's understanding of how powerful it is, we kind of want to focus in the short term in some of these applications we can build just to get people used to the framework and this architecture so they can start later on thinking about, okay, there's a lot more yet to be built that we today don't know which other applications that could be built with us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just to speak to this market, I mean, I know I used in my example open source software, but I've kind of been public goods pilled since I got into this space, and I've learned about climate change and the funding of journalism and basically all of our global, national, local public goods and digital public goods are in some form composed in this multipolar trap problem. Coordination failures, public goods funding failures are multipolar trap failures, and it just makes me excited that when there tend to be money Legos in an area, it means that there's being advancements made in solving some of these problems. And I don't know, that's why Anoma first struck a chord with me. Is just, wow, the amount of important problems in the world that are multipolar traps is very vast, and they're also existential to humanity. And so I think that's what got me really excited about this direction when I first learned about you all.
Yeah. And actually, the discovery that we had was that while we're building those systems to bring more tools for coordination and more large-scale coordination for people, we also realized the same infrastructure and the same properties that this protocol exposes are the ones that most modern and interesting applications in the decentralized world need.
The world has woken up to refi, and CELO is here for it. CELO is the layer one for the regenerative finance movement. It's fast, planet positive, and built for the real world. CELO has committed to producing a sustainable future from day one and has built its technology around one of the lowest carbon impact consensus mechanisms, and is the world's first carbon negative EVM compatible layer one blockchain. CELO is a movement to create the conditions of prosperity for everyone, whether it's tokenizing carbon credits with Toucan, providing capital to underserved communities with Unicorn, or building for millions of users around the globe. CELO was created to transform crypto enthusiasts into a movement of changemakers. Follow along on Twitter @CELO.org to learn more about how CELO is accelerating refi for a positive, lasting impact on people, communities, and the planet. And if you're a builder interested in refi, be sure to join the Build with CELO hackathon live now with a prize pool of over $100,000. COINSHIFT is a leading treasury management and infrastructure platform for DAOs and crypto businesses that need to manage their treasury operations. Every crypto org needs to manage its treasury, and COINSHIFT offers a simple, flexible, and efficient multi-chain treasury management platform built on top of the highly secure Gnosis Safe. With COINSHIFT, your organization can go from primitive single-chain treasury management to expressive, flexible, and multi-chain treasury features, such as global user management, global contacts, proposal management, and many other features that can be shared across an entire organization, allowing users to save time and reduce operational burdens and gas costs. COINSHIFT even has data tools like account reporting across the 7 chains on which it operates. Used by industry powerhouses such as Uniswap Grants, Balancer, Consensus, and Masari, COINSHIFT is speeding up the coordination and efficiency of the organizations that use it. You have to keep up with the frontier, and COINSHIFT makes that easy. So sign up at coinshift.xyz/bankless.
Tell me about the state of Anoma and the projects. Like, when does it launch? When can we start playing with applications that use it? Does it feel like a dApp? How, like, that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So I would say, like, at the moment, my first mission is to tell more people about how we're thinking about Anoma as the protocol. And what I'm really focusing personally is in trying to explore which applications we should build first as examples, similar to how Ethereum launched with 3 applications. We're looking into picking 3 applications that currently exist, as in, for example, I really hope to have something looks like fungible token trading and NFT marketplaces, but I kind of want to have something that is not DeFi. And so I'm really excited to build, for example, Gitcoin as one of the example applications, because this one is really complex right now already, and it will benefit a lot from Anoma. And then at the same time, we're exploring a bunch of other novel applications. At the moment, thinking about in the world of multivariable bartering, as you can barter anything if you can express it in an intent, and there is no you just create your intent and then see what happens later, and it might be settled, might not be settled, but you can't barter with anything. And another thing that we're exploring with is, for example, multidimensional DAOs. So DAOs that can handle more, on one hand, also privacy. So like composable privacy, and having in one application the ability to easily handle which parts are transparent data and which parts are private data. This is like another advantage of Anoma's architecture that allows developers and users to reason through privacy in a very easy way. And there's just many other applications that we're just thinking about right now. And that right now we don't know which one is gonna be the ones that people like the most. But what we're gonna go for is by mid next year, we're gonna have a testnet with those applications already live. So and then people will be able to play with them.
Great. Yeah, well, I mean, I can, of course, make intros to Gitcoin people if you want to talk about building a quadratic funding application.
Please do, because I honestly think that at the moment, so actually I was chatting with the Gitcoin guys because I saw the announcement and I was wondering how does the new Gitcoin look like. But suddenly it is really important for Anoma to see teams like Gitcoin and a bunch of other teams that are doing research into interesting governance mechanisms, interesting like forms of pool money. These are all applications that at glance clearly benefits from Anoma. But it's also for us to kind of like make sure that because it's new, we kind of don't expect that people will be the ones that straight off will build on the application. So we'll be building directly the intent formats, the validated predicates, and provide the right SDK for solver in a way where, in the case of Gitcoin, the hardest part it will be, which is the one that computes the QF results. That part we cannot write, but at least we can provide it in a way where you can just use that code and then directly operate a solver. Got it.
Cool. Well, yeah, I mean, I think that it'd be interesting to see the new decentralized modular ecosystem of Git grants protocol, what the intersection of that is with Anoma. Is there any sort of switching costs? Like, say I'm using a DApp on Ethereum today. Most of our audience is on Ethereum, but we also have people on Cosmos and Solana who listen. I'm wondering if there's any sort of switching costs. Does Gitcoin grants on the new decentralized grants protocol feel just like a DApp that is on Anoma?
So architecturally, the way we are thinking about Anoma is we're building and deploying a global layer 1, but you can actually use the same global layer 1 as a layer 1.5. If, for example, you want to keep the anchor on Ethereum, which I think makes a lot of sense. A big part of the community around Gitcoin cares a lot about Ethereum. There's no reason
the network
why
effects are there.
It makes no sense why you have to force it. So the way you would use it that way is that you will get the counterparty discovery and distributed solving part. In the end, you're producing a transaction that is later on settled directly on Ethereum. So on one hand, you get the entire decentralization part until that, but then you can still do the final payouts using Ethereum. And some of this infrastructure has already been built for the other protocol, which is Namada. This is this trustless two-way bridge that we have built, and then Anoma could also use this as like the bridge protocol for it.
Got it.
So I would say like there will be some UX trade-offs because Anoma's layer 1 for that has an incredibly straightforward UX where we want to basically, once you have created an intent, it will be settled as it was described. So this kind of declarative application, declarative paradigm for applications, which in my mind, I think is very important for if you want all these applications to ever reach mass adoption, because otherwise the moment, in order to use any of these apps or protocols securely or privately, I need to understand so well the underlying infrastructure, the privacy, and then everything, how it integrates with like the front ends, with infrastructure. So that's unfeasible. So the benefit of using Anoma or building Anoma as a layer 1 is that you get this entire declarative paradigm for your DApp. But if you just wanted to decentralize specific component, think of, for example, not just Gitcoin, but also OpenSea or the optimistic or secure rollups. They at the moment have centralized sequences. Then they could use the Anoma stack to produce the final state transition for Ethereum, and then that will be passed to Ethereum over the bridge.
Got it. Okay, so in my mind, I had been thinking of this as mostly an application layer phenomena, but you could actually compose parts of layer twos, in which are more protocol level, with this architecture. Did I hear that right?
It's more that you can really pick and choose which part it is that you wanna. The thing is that about Anoma is that it does offer things that no other scalable solutions don't offer, kind of product discovery or distributed solving. But any application that might need that part can still in the end choose where to finally settle.
Right.
This is like the layer 1.5 approach, where you're not doing the final settlement on Anoma, but you are doing the final settlement on Ethereum. You can even go a step further and say, let's think of a world where Ethereum is incredibly valuable because of its security model, and you want to rent as much security from Ethereum's validators as possible.
Yeah.
You can even deploy Anoma as a layer 2 on Ethereum, where the entire execution gets validated on Ethereum as a chain.
Got it. Really can't wait to see what this ecosystem turns into. And my whole theory on one of my sort of thinkings about regenerative crypto is that the more money Legos we have for doing regenerative crypto, the more regenerative crypto will exist, the more crypto regenerates the world. And it's kind of this dominoes effect. And I think of like the quadratic funding protocol that Gitcoin's building, and other quadratic funding protocols as being core money Legos for creating more coordination, for creating more regen stuff. And it feels like Anoma for me is in that category. So can't wait to see what it looks like at maturity. Is there anything else within this design space of solving multipolar traps that really excites you, or anything that I didn't ask that you want to say?
We didn't get to touch upon Namada at all. Is that something that interests you, or should I skip
let's
that?
get into it.
Okay, so we're actually working on two protocols. One is Anoma, which is the entire architecture. It's for dApps, but then there is this other protocol that we call Namada. And the thing that you guys might find more interesting about Namada is that we are thinking of privacy in this protocol as a public good. And so what the protocol does is very simple. If no matter what assets you want to use as means of exchange, so as tokens or NFTs or any kind of asset that has been originated on Ethereum or any fast finality enabled chain, those you can use as money, where you get the privacy guarantees as Zcash has. So it enables full shielded transfers, and it even allows you to retrofit privacy, even if the originating chain did not have privacy natively speaking. So the main purpose is to offer asset agnostic privacy. But the other characteristic about how we're thinking about the protocol is, I think fundamentally, so far we've been thinking about privacy as a feature, but it is more right to think about it as a public good, because the feature is useful as independently. But privacy is not if only one person uses it, because anonymity sets are weak if there's not a lot of volume of usage in there. So privacy by the Namada protocol is regarded as a public good in the sense of it is built and designed in a way where you cannot exclude access to it. It's non-excludable. And on the other hand, it is clearly anti-rivalrous public good, because the more people use the shielded set and they contribute with different kinds of assets, the stronger the privacy guarantees every individual gets from it. So we are experimenting with a bunch of funding mechanisms. So the protocol itself will fund the shielded set. So if you choose to use shielded transfers over transparent transfers, the protocol will reward you with something. And then it has also its own governance mechanism that deploys some kind of it's like a limited form of liquid democracy, where you can select a public goods funding council that can allocate as well parts of the treasury to fund different kinds of public goods. That could be privacy, but it could also be software, Gitcoin, art, anything else.
Yeah. It feels like a kind of core complement to Anoma to have this privacy preserving layer one technology next to it, and it seems like it's gonna just allow Anoma to do more things in more places. But I think the privacy thing is actually a really important one to drill in on, because if we're broadcasting all of these intents to each other, in what ways can we reveal the intent and enable a solver to solve them, but also not reveal too much about ourselves? And
Yeah.
in poker, if you broadcast your intent, you're actually losing the game. And so there's kind of like a line that you have to walk there, and I think it's great that you're building infrastructure for it.
Yeah, so actually, there's 2 points I want to remark related to Namada. The way we're looking at Namada and how it relates in the future roadmap for Anoma is more that it is an intermediate step to get people in the decentralized world to be more used to some of the properties that we have recently unlocked, such as the assets can freely move from the protocols through which they were originating, and you can use them in different chains like Namada to gain some features like privacy that you could not get in the originating chain. So I think right now we have seen some protocols live in bridges, but I think so far it's still in its infancy. We haven't established a good precedent where people truly understand how a multi-chain in a cross-chain world looks like. That's one thing. And the other thing is privacy. But this, what you mentioned now about intents and privacy, it's actually right. So I skipped this part, but the state machine of Anoma is very unique in the way that it handles different kinds of privacy states. So it handles transparent Anoma issues, wasn't, but for shielded Anoma and private Anoma, it handles like it deploys other kinds of cryptography to be able to still verify those kinds of intents. And this is true. Like at the moment, with just transparent Anoma, you will lose privacy even at the intent level, because both the who and the what of the intents will be fully readable on chain, just like right now on any blockchain. But already with Taiga, the unified execution environment, we can make at least the intents be shielded. And shielded means that the who is kept fully private until the very end. And even the what, however, has to be transparent because of the reason that you mentioned, which is solvers need to be able to understand what the intent is in order to find which other intents can be combined. But we are looking into making the intent fully private. And at the moment, we are designing Taiga in a way that is able to leverage some kind of full homomorphic encryption, so that when you create an intent, it's fully encrypted, so nobody can read it. You pass it along to another person, the other person doesn't compute, etc., etc., etc. But sadly, the state of FHE is still a bit early, and we don't know how this right now seems to be the right direction to enable fully private intents. But at the moment, it is not practical. But there is a will to have fully private Anoma if you wanted to. But I think the most before we say we need privacy or we do not need privacy, I think the most exciting thing about Anoma is that it approaches privacy from more the developer's perspective, as in, okay, what do applications need? And applications do not need, versus the current approach, which is all is transparent, all is private. It's more to make it easier for applications to reason through what parts need to be private when and what parts need to be public when.
Yeah. It just feels like there's a whole world of cryptography and zero knowledge proofs and homomorphic encryption that is going to be one positive externality of all the stuff that's going on in this space is the research into that. And I agree with what you said about privacy being a public good. I think it's really foundational that y'all are building that into the infrastructure of Anoma and the projects you're working on. Is there anything else that you want to say that I didn't ask? I'm just going to ask open-ended questions because I feel like you understand this design space way better than me.
If you know of more teams that are exploring building all these interesting ideas and coordination mechanisms, but they are definitely hitting some barriers, constraints with the existing architectures, I'll be really interested in just using them as a source of inspiration. Because for us, when you build a protocol, you are making the design decisions so that you can enable as much as possible, even the things that we don't even know that people want to build. But being able to pick up some applications, especially not just DeFi applications, even though we know people want to use them, I would really like to be able to pick more applications as examples that are more in the realm of better coordination mechanisms, better public goods funding mechanisms, and better governance mechanisms or anything in that
Beautiful.
realm.
Well, it feels like you've built the Legos, and now it's a matter of evangelizing them and building an ecosystem around them. And so if I'm a builder out there that's listening to the Greenpill Pod, maybe a regen builder, which is most of our audience, where do we go to learn more about Anoma and how to build on top of it?
So the first step is certainly to get used to this framework and start thinking about this, and you will be breaking your current understanding of how like decentralized applications work.
Totally.
And
Yeah,
this is necessary. This is going to be a necessary first step. So the thing I recommend the most to read is the Anoma Whitepaper. It is a draft, but it does actually talk about even Gitcoin as an application. I didn't finish this draft yet, and I want to talk a little bit more about other applications. But if you just read the first pages of the white paper, it will definitely give you the right framework from the get-go. And just stay tuned by looking at, just follow us on Twitter. And then once it is ready to showcase some of these applications that we will build, you can already start playing with it.
Beautiful. All right. And where can people find you personally online?
Just on Twitter.
Okay. We'll have a link in the show notes here. It's Awa Sun Yin is your Twitter handle. So we'll have a link in the show notes. Cool. All right. Well, thanks so much for coming on the Greenpill Pod. Really excited to see what is built on Anoma, and maybe we can have you back in a year or two and do a retrospective on all the things we learned and the cool stuff that's been built there.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It was really fun.
You bet.